Hello, everyone. Welcome. Oh, I'm being projected into the room here. Welcome. Thanks for joining us on our one day of the summer. I really appreciate it. You could probably all be enjoying your evenings, having a barbecue in the back garden. So yeah, really appreciate that you're able to join us here tonight at CodeBase. Welcome to this evening's event that we've titled Cofounder Curious. Before we get into it, we do need to run through some housekeeping. I imagine I see some familiar faces, so some of you do and have been to CodeBase Edinburgh before, but it is important we run through it. So we're not expecting a fire alarm. If you hear the fire alarm, please exit through the fire exit, this one there, and you can also head out through the front door there. For those of you new to the space, the bathrooms are just to the very back, and there's a button to get through. If you have any questions for us this evening, we have a lot of people joining us online tonight, so hello to those of you online. All questions should be asked via our Menti, which you'll see a QR code coming up on the screen to prompt you to do so. And this is, again, just to equalise the experience of asking questions for those in the room and those online, because we've got about 20 online, I believe, tonight. And lastly, we ask that you abide by the code of conduct while you're in our space. So thank you very much for working with us on that. Okay, so speaking today, hi, I'm Natalie. I'm one of the startup program managers at CodeBase. I specifically look after the Techscaler course for our early stage founders, which I'll go into in a little bit. And I'm also going to be joined by Rob Gelb later on tonight, who's a startup founder, editor of Campfire newsletter. Anyone in the room currently follow Campfire and keep up to date? Some hands in the room. We're going to convert the whole room, so you're all following him by the end of tonight. And he's also a visiting fellow at the University of St Andrews Entrepreneurship Centre. And I'm also supported today by my excellent colleagues, Erin, who is hosting our online folks. So thank you, Erin. Say hello to Erin. Jack, who is looking very impressive next to all the tech over there. And Oren, who is running around helping with everything else. So thank you for all of them for helping us tonight. And also joining us today, all of you, very exciting, obviously looking just as excited as this man in the GIF. Great to see. And why do I say that? We want to feel as connected with you as possible, and we want you all to connect with each other. So today is about co-founders. It's potentially about meeting a potential co-founder. So in order to facilitate you all connecting even better, you might have seen the directory, sort of, for those of you in the room, you would have seen the directory up on the TV at the back of the screen. If you haven't added your details there, I'd highly encourage you to do so. I appreciate maybe not all of you are looking for a co-founder tonight, but if you are, and if you'd like to kind of follow up with interesting conversations, I'd suggest you put your details on there. So that's a QR code that goes to the link. That'll ask you a few quick questions, and you'll be added to the directory. And again, this is a place for those of you in person and online, so we want these spaces to kind of come together in that way. And this QR code will show you the overall directory, so you can see on your phone as well as at the back there who is in the room, in the virtual and the physical room. So in terms of today's agenda, we had some sort of chit-chat networking in the room and online. And I'm just going to go through some sort of introductions. We're going to kick off at about 10 past with a fireside chat with Rob. We'll open it up to Q&A again via our Mentimeter. We're going to go through a sort of visioning exercise as well. I'll be wrapping up around about 5 to 7, and then we're going to be networking from 7 till 6:30 again. So I do need to go through this spiel of what is Techscaler and what is Startup First Steps. This is partly why we're doing this event, so please do indulge me if you're already a Techscaler member. But for those of you who have not heard of Techscaler or are not currently a member, Techscaler is a Scottish Government-funded membership programme that is delivered by CodeBase. And the aim of Techscaler is to help people around Scotland launch and scale tech startups. And this is done through different interventions such as education courses across the entire startup lifecycle, different community events, and one-to-one mentorship as well. Techscaler, as it is now, will likely iterate, and we iterate based on community feedback. So you'll probably look a little bit different in the years to come. It's free to become a member, so if you're not currently a Techscaler member, you're more than welcome to join, and you can join today or anytime. And what is Techscaler Startup First Steps? So Startup First Steps is the Techscaler course designed for early stage members. It's a cohort-based 13-week course designed for both technical and non-technical founders looking to get the first version of their product into market or their first MVP into market. It's composed of 9 core workshops, 3 reflection weeks, and 1 showcase to celebrate everything at the very end, and that brings us to 13 weeks. It's delivered across Scotland, so it's not just here in Edinburgh. We deliver in all of our different hubs, which is Highlands and Islands, North East, Dundee and Tayside, Central Scotland, Glasgow in the West, and South of Scotland, and Edinburgh and Lothians, of course. The lectures themselves are led by industry experts, such as Rob, and startup founders like Rob. There's lots of opportunities throughout this course. The reason it's a cohort-based in-person course is to allow as many opportunities for you to meet each other across the country, to connect with other early-stage founders and just the wider ecosystem in general. Applications for the current or upcoming cohort, the autumn 2024 cohort, are open. This cohort will go from September 4th until November 27th, every Wednesday from 10 o'clock until 1 p.m. There are two deadlines to keep in mind. It's a little bit confusing. So the first deadline is the deadline to apply for your Techscaler membership in time. That's July 24th. So that's for those of you in the room who are not currently Techscaler members. The deadline to apply for Techscaler is July 24th. And for those of you who are currently members considering to take part in the course, the deadline to enroll in the First Steps course is July 31st. So just to clarify, you must be a Techscaler member in order to access the service of Startup First Steps. So there's a week gap just to allow enough time for us to triage anyone who applies to become a Techscaler member with the intention to go through First Steps. I will be hanging around the rest of the night. I didn't want to spend too much time talking about First Steps, but for those of you in the room and online, if you have any questions about the course at all, I'm not sure if it's right for you or what kind of things we cover, please do come up and have a chat. I'm also happy to have a one-to-one after this event as well. I did put a video here, which I'm actually kind of delighted isn't going to work because I talk a lot in this video and that's really embarrassing, but this is basically a video that shows what happened at the showcase for the last cohort, which wrapped up in April? Yes, that's right. So we'll share this link at another time and you can all watch me and the other participants talk about their experience, but delighted to not do that tonight. Oh, no, moving, bye. Anyway. Right, so into this evening, so Cofounder Curious. The reason I wanted to do this event is because this came from feedback from our previous cohort of Startup First Steps. I had lots of people and participants asking questions around co-founders. This is not something that we talk about during the First Steps course. It is something that's included in the Startup Basics course, but I felt it merited its own sort of event. So some of the questions that sort of have come up before is, do you need a co-founder? How do you find a co-founder? What kind of conversations do you need to cover early on? How do you maintain a loving and strong co-founder relationship? And till death do us part, that's basically, do you stick and be together as co-founders till the very bitter end, or is there an appropriate time to go separate ways? So these are sort of questions that have come up previously from our participants, and so I wanted to do an event on this topic. I've stuck in a graphic there to kind of like kick off the conversation with Rob. So for those of you in the room who might not be able to see it, so it's a pie chart. Who doesn't love a pie chart? Every data person ever. So a number of founders in 1,000 unicorns, with about a quarter of them being single or solo founders and the rest being composed of multiple founders. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'd like to invite Rob to hobble up to the front here. Some pity, poor Rob is wearing a boot, but yes, welcome Rob. Thank you. And also, if you could sit down. And I just want to highlight, if you have any questions, the QR code to the Menti is linked at the bottom right of the screen. But yes, I'm going to move over here now while Jack moves the camera. Lovely. That felt very smooth. How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
That was excellent, very smooth transition from here to there. But yeah, I guess I wanted to kick off first with kind of that graphic that I just showed. This. You know, there's only 25% of solo founders who've been able to successfully create a unicorn. And one question that I've often gotten from participants is, do I really need a co-founder? Is that the only way to be able to get VC funding or funding in general? Is it more risky to kind of be a solo founder? So I guess I wanted to throw that one out to you.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is not a satisfying one. It depends. It depends on what it is that you're doing. It depends on what it is that you need. It depends on what it is that you want to do with it. The reasons why a VC or investors usually like to see co-founders is probably because it's probably relatively straightforward in terms of why you think it would be beneficial to have co-founders. It's not just having like multiple sense checks. It's the idea of all of the things that you need to do in a very short amount of time, especially if you're talking about like a venture scale business or a power venture scale business is a lot. And the idea that one person can do it all, or that one person can spur it all, is a bit more difficult for someone to easily get on board with than if they're up against someone else who they're also considering that has a team of 3 with deep backgrounds in everything that they're looking at. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when you're starting something, if any of you have actually started a business already or you're in the process of doing that, you're probably coming at it from a specific expertise in terms of industry or a specific expertise in terms of people or customer base, or you have a knack for approaching problems a certain way. And if you're thinking about a circle of skills that you need, the fact that you are some sort of expert means you're not an expert somewhere else. Right. And so that's the reason why it makes sense that co-founding teams are preferred, but it's not needed. And I don't think you should be using that as an excuse to say, oh, I need a co-founder because otherwise I'm not going to get invested in. That's, I think, it's backwards. It's those that have multiple co-founders often are more successful than others. It's not to say they are successful because they have multiple co-founders, though. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a distinction there.
And do you find that with co-founders, I often have people saying, I'm a technical person, so I'm looking for a non-technical person, and vice versa. And they're specifically looking for that kind of duo. Do you think that is really what people should be chasing, or can it be a bit more flexible?
No, you shouldn't be just seeking out someone because you're technical and they're non-technical, or vice versa. I think you need to be thinking about the skills that you lack, both the skills in terms of the technical skills, and by technical I mean like specific areas of expertise, but also then the decision-making skills. So I personally, I know people who love building their one-man bands, one-woman bands. They're building SaaS products and they're doing super well. I prefer bouncing ideas off of someone else, sharing in all of the celebrations and commiserations that we go through, talking my ideas out. I still like to be the one in charge. I'm not super experienced in being the secondary co-founder, but I want someone else to have a different type of skin in the game than an early employee. But I think what I see a lot of people do is they are oversimplistic, especially non-technical co-founders or non-technical founders who are saying, oh, I need someone to build me an app, therefore I need a technical co-founder. But what they're really saying is, I don't have the money or I don't want to pay someone to build my app for me. Mm. And that's a very different thing. And so are you actually looking for a co-founder, or are you looking for the first employee? You just can't pay for them yet.
So that's what I was going to say. In this instance, would it be better to consider early employees? And what would be the difference between having a co-founder versus an early employee?
I think a lot of times, so there's this, I'll wonk out for a second. There's this serial COO named Adib Bamier, and he has this concept that I love. It's an organizational complexity chart. One is like you in your garage. Building something. 10 is IBM. It's super complicated, super complex. Someone who is a good 1 is probably a really crap 10. Mm. And vice versa, someone who's a really great 10 is probably a really crap 1. And it's not just on you running a business. It's if you're marketing, if you're a really good 2, 3, 4, you're probably not going to be a great 9, 10. So when you as a founder, it also applies to you as well. We all individually have maybe 2 or 3 of those numbers, and then we either find it really hard below that number and we start to tap out in terms of our abilities after that number. As a founder, you need to be able to recognize that in yourself, recognize that in all of the people that you employ, because you're planning, we're growing quite fast. We can't hire 2s anymore. We are at a 3 right now, but we also shouldn't be hiring 7s. So you need to kind of understand where you fit in that kind of organizational complexity. You need to understand where your team does, and you need then a partner who also understands that in their area of expertise. If you're looking for a technical co-founder who wants to stay with the business and grow with the business, that is a very different person than someone who can whip up an app in a weekend and is a dev, right? So the difference between a co-founder versus a first employee, I think, is that understanding of that longevity of what's required in building an organization, but also, are they going to be responsible or have ownership over the business decisions, not just technical area, not just other, is it a partnership or is it a job? And I think those are very different things. And if you're thinking, yeah, but I just don't have money to pay for an early, like a first employee, that's a separate problem that we can deal with. There are other ways to go about it, but thinking that, oh, I'm just going to paper that over by finding myself a technical co-founder, not necessarily the right way to do it. Oftentimes it is the right way, because what you're thinking about is fundamentally requiring a technical solution to a problem. And if you're not a technical person, as an investor, I would be questioning, well, how do you have then the upper hand? But it's not, you should be just very careful in terms of how you're going about it. The last point I just make on that is a co-founder does not mean it's someone who is starting the business with you, which is weird. If you're thinking about, oftentimes, I know people who, they will go through a round of funding, maybe they'll go into their pre-series A, maybe they're looking at that, and they're going to bring on some sort of heavy hitter that's actually going to join as a co-founder. Like him or hate him, Elon Musk has not started many businesses. He did not start Tesla. He didn't start SpaceX. He's called the founder. He came in later. So if you're wanting to be overly simplistic and have someone to look at as an example, there's one. But just because you're a co-founder doesn't actually necessarily, you don't need to have everything all ready for Natalie Co. to launch before you start. You might get it to a certain point and be like, oh man, I need this core skill and this core competency that I just don't have. I want to find a co-founder now, and it's a year in. That's all. That's fine. And
there can be co-founders, but there's a distinction between CEOs, CFOs, and all of that. That's all different as well.
Yeah, totally. I would hesitate. I mean, I've beaten this drum before. I would hesitate to even give titles at the beginning, especially if you have a technical co-founder. Maybe you might need someone to have a title externally, but as a personal preference, not introducing titles means that if you need to replace someone, or you need to bring in a level of management above someone later on, it makes life a bit easier. So, for example, I'm picking on the technical side just because it's an easy question. You have a technical co-founder. They're really great in terms of coming up with the initial idea with you, developing the initial idea with you. They're a good confidant, but they're a crap manager. They just are not a good manager. So it might mean that they aren't going to be the CTO, or they're not going to be able to grow with the company. They might leave, or they might be cool with bringing in a technical manager, and they're still there, and they can still be a co-founder. They're just not the CTO. If they started life out as the CTO, it's much harder for someone to then say, oh yeah, sure, I will take a demotion on paper and still be happy about that.
Awesome, amazing. And so you've done the reflection, you're thinking, yes, I am going to look for a co-founder now. Do you find that those who end up co-founding something with their friend versus someone who's kind of went out there to meet random people and they've finally found someone who meets the criteria, do you think there's more risk in sort of founding something with a friend or someone that you're close with already? Or
yes, there is more risk. Doesn't mean that it's not possible, but there's definitely more risk. And I think most of the risk is because of assumptions that you are making for how the other person will react or how you will work together. And you are both making assumptions that in a cold relationship you would talk through that you wouldn't talk through. It's the healthiest relationship is one that you start because the business is bringing you together. You have to watch out with, it's like going into business with your spouse in a way, right? If you're talking about friends. Where does the friendship start? Where does it end? What kind of a request seems personal versus business-wise? How do you disagree? When there's disagreement, it's always going to be challenging. A little bit easier if the reason why you guys are working together and spending time together is because you're both amazingly focused on what it is that you're doing. You still will probably become friends with them if you do well, but you can totally start companies with people who you would not be friends with or spend a lot of time socially with. It's also completely okay.
Feels like those relationships if you're co-founding with a friend, you're neglecting setting the foundations and those boundaries at the start, which if it was someone that you didn't know, you have the opportunity to do so. But there are still plenty of co-founders who don't do that.
Yes.
So with thinking about issues that can arise between co-founders, what have you kind of observed or what have you experienced in the past?
The biggest source of a lot of issues are lack of an ability to communicate, just fundamental lack of an ability to communicate, and an assumption that you're really good at it. Most likely, you're really crap at it. And we're all very crap at it. But you assuming that you're good at it, that means the other person must be crap at it. That's a problem. And then the second is mismatched expectations. And there's a great book called The Founder's Dilemmas. Definitely suggest people pick that up. Noam Wasserman. Mm-hmm. And it talks about control-motivated people and wealth-motivated people. Wealth-motivated people is not a great term. It's not talking about money. It's talking about like wealth of ideas. So it might be easier for you to think of it as like communal focused people. It's not about someone interested in community. It's more like if I have an idea or if I have a problem, do I have a very clear vision about what I want, and I'm happy for the thing to be not perfect, like for me to turn off a whole bunch of people, but it's very clear in my vision. So I'm happy for it to be a smaller success. That's control motivated. Like you're a little bit more wired to say, I want it to be a certain way. Wealth motivated or communally motivated is you might have something, and if someone can convince me that my angle is not right, then I'm happy to change. Oh yeah, let's flip. So you might be thinking about either of those two things and thinking, oh, I lean one way or the other. And you'll assume that everybody else is the same, and they're not. And so one of the big problems that you end up having is this mismatch in terms of expectations and ways of working is that if you are a communal motivated person or a wealth motivated person and your co-founder is a control motivated person and you don't understand that in the beginning, that's a problem. Like that usually, because that will probably lead to mismatched expectations. The other thing is that money and lack of comfort with like control does weird things to people. Money does weird things to people. So if you are building something, you're working on it for a year, it's really, really hard. You really think it's going to go gangbusters. You're starting to see some traction, and someone comes in and says, "I'll buy your business for $1 million." You might think, "Yeah, take it," whereas your co-founder might be like, "No, we're doing this. This is a unicorn. I'm not spending my time to make $500,000 after the tax, man. That's like $250,000. That's nothing. That's not worth my time, right?" A lot of people don't have these kind of conversations beforehand. Like, what do you want to build? It's not about ambition. It's about what is it that you want to build in terms of whether it's lifestyle, whether it's the amount of money you want to exit for. A lot of this stuff people either don't actually think about, or they assume that they're simpatico with someone else, or they'll say, "Oh, well, we'll get to it when we come to it." So there's that, and then the final point is performance. We all don't think that we are going into something thinking that we're not going to pull our own weight, which is a problem when inevitably someone doesn't pull their own weight or there's a mismatch of communications or expectations. So not having these conversations about all of these areas beforehand is a huge reason why I see people that end up having like kind of co-founder breakups or that it just doesn't work out. So the thing that I would suggest that you do is have the really tough conversations when there's literally nothing. There's no stakes at all. You sit down and say, "Okay, cool. We've been working on this for a while. Someone offers us $1 million. Do we say no? No. Okay, cool. We're on board with that. How about 10? How about 20? Like, what's your number? What's your individual number? What's someone else's individual number?" And they should be honest and be like, "Oh, someone's giving me $20 million for this, and we've only been working on it for a year. I think I'm good with that. You know." So just be aware. Do you want to build this into a unicorn? Do you want to go on that power venture path? That is not for everyone, and it's also not appropriate for most kind of businesses. Do you want to make something, profitable? Are you political? Are you not political? Do you believe that social impact is important? Do you think that it's important but not in a business context? A lot of this stuff might sound like why are we worried about this? Because this is a problem for big companies or larger companies. You having those conversations to start off with, it's a really great way for you to get to know each other, and it's super important because all of those discussions have already happened. By the time when something does pop up, you know, all right, if we disagree, at the end of the day, you're the one who overrides me. Or if I'm not pulling my weight, we've agreement of you telling me it in this way, and I've already said that I will probably give up some equity because if I'm not performing right. So anyway, I don't know if that's the over answer.
That was a lot of great things, but definitely it seems like alignment of kind of the goals, culture, what your values are, exits as well, like what you see as the future as the company. And I think that's all well and good and very important to have those questions at the beginning, but it feels like this is something that should be a regular discussion because at the very beginning, it feels like there's so much opportunity. You're very excited. You're maybe not as jaded because you're not 2 years into it. You're not sick of it. You don't want to... you've got the 20 million offer there, like you want to leave. So would you advise this as something you revisit on the regular and also on a formal basis? You mentioned agreement. Do you mean more just like a spoken agreement, co-founder agreement? What does that look like? My concern, or some of the founders I've spoken to, is they feel they're too early to kind of have this sort of admin or sort of agreement in place. It just seems
I'm not a fan of agreements in general. I do think, though, agreements are clarifying. And so if you are agreeing that you're going to be co-founder dating with someone, fine. But just set that expectations verbally, whatever, and say, hey, let's work together on a project. Let's see how we work together. If we really want to do this series, then we'll structure something proper. There are co-founder agreement templates. I don't think you necessarily need to create a company. Some people would disagree with that, and they say, no, you got to make a company for it to be legal. I don't think so. I think if you're coming up with a reasonable contract or like a reasonable agreement, and to say if you choose to go forward, this is what will happen. I think that's reasonable. But having a conversation about, okay, well then, what does equity look like? Is it equal? Like, do you think that equal is important? Do you think it's worth something is worth more than other people? I've been through this now several times, and having that conversation, not only how much equity is reasonable, and also what happens if you leave, what happens if you need to be sidestepped, if you need to be redeployed, if your job description changes. Having those conversations is the most important. Having an agreement should then be relatively easy and light because you've already had those conversations. You already agreed. Proper, like, for when it comes to time to formation of the company, one thing to say, and this may be a little bit too wonky, but the US and the UK deal with this differently, and or at least there's a perception of what co-founders are entitled to that is a bit different, generalized. Over here, we have concepts of like good leaver, bad leaver clauses in contracts, and that is not done in the States as much. Weirdly, you'd expect there to be a lot more like protection in case like a co-founder is going to leave, but usually the default is like you have a vesting schedule, which we can talk to if anybody's interested in that, but you don't need to worry about that too much. And it's time-based, and whatever equity you have, you walk with you. Whereas over here, you might have a situation where if you leave and you've already retained a certain amount of equity, you actually have to give some of that back because it's going to be putting the business at a disadvantage. The Americans actually find that very weird. I love it. I think that's great. I think that's a good clarifying thing because it's putting the business first. But just if you have good lever or bad lever, or if you don't have good lever or bad lever, it's not the end of the world either way.
Lots to think about. Sorry, I thought someone was having a question in the audience there. So say you've got a co-founder, it's all going great, an offer comes up and there is tension that starts to arise. You're working with them day and night and all of a sudden you're absolutely sick to your teeth with this person. It's not, well, it is personal, but in terms of the company, it's still working. What kind of founder disagreements have you observed, and what have you suggested to co-founders who have reached what feels like a breaking point, or at least there's noticeable tension that's impacting the business?
Before it gets to that stage, I would have hoped that you would have agreed to some sort of mechanism whereby someone is either the last decider, or you have some sort of person that you've identified as the person we might go to if we are just at loggerheads, whether formally or informally. So I've served as that for people. Like kind of mediation is a strong word, but like hey, we are at a fundamental disagreement here. We don't know if we should break up, right? If you have the presence of mind to actually say, we don't know if we should break up, I actually think that's great, that's fantastic. Usually they don't. Usually you get into a spiral of you start to resent the other person, your stress takes advantage of you, you start to see a lot of things that aren't there, and then it becomes a divorce, and usually like an acrimony is like it's not good. And I've seen those too, and I've been asked to help with some of them as well. So like the thing that I would unfortunately try and caution is assume that's going to happen. You said till death do you part. Mm-hmm. No, just assume it's not going to be death do you part, and that's okay because people move on. If we were starting something together and we were 4 years in, and I just wasn't feeling it anymore. And I was like, you know what, I'm just not feeling it anymore. I want to do something else. If we had already talked about that, and I know, and I come in and say, I'm not feeling it anymore. I'm going to give back all the equity. I'm going to be as helpful as I can. Let's part on good terms. That's one thing. If I say I'm not feeling it anymore. Oh, by the way, I'm going to keep all my equity because you might do something with it. You're going to feel a lot different. I might be though sitting in there and thinking, but I worked. The agreement was I got all my equity after 4 years. So what's the problem? So there's like a difference between what's actually written or what's actually agreed to versus what you think may happen in the moment. And I think that if whether or not you are leaving and you are thinking you are being forced out or you're being pushed out, or you are asking someone to leave or you're the one staying on there, remembering that people are human, and remembering you are dealing with a human, and remember that life is very short. There are other businesses, there are other opportunities, and at the end of the day, like you becoming overly emotional and emotionally engaged with something is more likely, it's just a sign that you probably want to at least run everything you're saying by someone else. And say, I want you to sense check me. Am I being ridiculous? Yes, I'm being ridiculous. Okay, fine. Maybe I'll cool it. Because I've also seen how that then makes a bad situation so much worse.
How can you find that type of person who can be the sounding board when this happens? Like, what resources do you go to? I think naturally you'd want to go to friends or family, but they're probably totally biased in this situation. How do you find that third party who isn't necessarily a co-founder themselves, but is trusted between the two of you and have your best interests?
Sometimes people go with investors, although sometimes that's good, sometimes that's perceived as not good. Sometimes it's a person that they both know mutually. That's not not a relation. They both mutually respect that they've agreed to beforehand. Or in the moment, they're like, all right, I trust this person. I trust that person, and you just ask them. And sometimes it's through a professional, like coaches are very good at this. Like I know some people who they didn't start out doing this, but like they're whether it's leadership coaches or facilitators or people like that don't really have a vested interest in it either way, and they just serve as a you're going to communicate through them, and I'm going to communicate through them, and there's going to be some sort of just like, do you really want to say that? Do you really want to say that? Just kind of sense checking on that. So like there's a variety of different sources. I wouldn't be thinking about like chairman and all this kind of stuff. Like personally at this stage, I wouldn't be worrying about a board at all. But that's my own personal view. So the board will be you and your co-founder, or the practical board. It might just be one person, but practically it will be two of you. So think about that maybe beforehand, and throughout your early discussions, it would be great if you just had that person that you went to, or that you indicated, and just write it down. Just write it down. Okay, so if we're at an impasse, if we're ready to strangle each other, let's ask this person to sense check what we're doing.
Nice. Or you could, go axing or something like that, get the energy out that way, try some alternative methods.
Maybe not together.
Maybe not together, separately, of course. Not to focus too much on what happens when it all turns bad, because hopefully you're all very hopeful about finding a co-founder and it's going to be wonderful, and I'm sure there'll be wonders and stresses to come. But just on the topic of equity, thinking about debt equity, could you explain what that is and what kind of to consider?
Yeah. Also, I think the fact that if you are dwelling on the bad things or the potential bad things, I think it's good because you are if you think about it and obsess over it, it is probably less likely to give you stress, either because it won't happen or you've already dealt with it. So it's not a waste of time. And I would definitely encourage you to think about that in a similar way that you might do in product management, a pre-mortem, right? Why is this going to fail? Psychologically, why is it going to fail? You know, what are all the little things about you that I'm not sure about, and about myself that I'm not sure about? Because if you're going into this thinking that you're perfect, you're going to fail at that. In terms of debt equity, what debt equity is we're running a business. I have 10%. I say bye-bye. I'm out. The 10% is now still with me, but I'm not an active part of the business, nor am I an investor. So that's debt equity. Usually what happens where you get into problems is if you don't have an agreement in place and you have one co-founder or one very senior employee that just wants to leave and take all their equity, but you're at a stage at which you really do need that. Oftentimes this is the biggest problem is when if you're trying to build like a power venture business or like a venture scale company and you're going through investment rounds, the founder equity really is important to investors. I can talk about why that is, but the people who are working on the business should have a really good incentive to stay in the business and to work their asses off so that they're going to get a big payout. That's why I am okay investing 20 million or 100 million into your business, because I know you're going to stick around and you're not going to just sit around and do nothing. So debt equity is quite important. So when you're thinking about that at the very early stages and talking to co-founders, talk to them. Hey, you've worked your ass off for 4 years and now it's not for you, and you have 10% of the company. What happens? Are we okay with that? Maybe. Maybe you are. I know people who would be very okay with that. They're like, yep, I've worked for 4 years. I think that's right. I think I'm entitled to that. And as long as you agree with them, great, keep it. Don't worry about it. Like, don't stress. I'm not telling you to get rid of that. It's more if you're assuming, oh, you're going to do the right thing by giving me back 10% or 9% of this equity so that I have an easier time going forward, and you thinking, why are you making that assumption? And then things getting a bit acrimonious. So as long as you're on board. If you're interested in bootstrapping, if you're like a bootstrapper, pro bootstrap, then this doesn't matter as much. Also, solo founders or people who love to build things and they're like thinking about bringing on a co-founder might find this a bit harder, about the idea of giving up control, giving up any kind of control. So that's what debt equity is. That's why you should think about it. Again, it's not about one way or the other. It's just you have to have that kind of conversation.
So another one to build into the kind of topics to cover with a potential founder early on.
What happens if you leave?
Yeah.
And then the answer should be, well, it depends how I leave, and it depends when I leave. And that's why you get into like vesting schedules, and there's all sorts of fancy things that lawyers have come up with that you can pay them to fix it for you. But you can also just learn about them, learn about different methods. I don't think you should be trying to overcomplicate things at the beginning, but having a conversation about vibe, feeling out the vibe of someone in terms of why are you doing this? What do you want to do? It is important.
And just talking about vibes, great vibes in here, but when you're trying to get that right vibe, when you're finding someone, just to bring us back to the very beginning, how do you find a co-founder? Where could you find a co-founder here? Obviously, you're all here hopefully to meet each other and talk to each other and potentially meet a co-founder, but it's really hard. I know people who have tried lots of different methods and really struggled, but what are your experiences been with finding a co-founder? Have you had any sort of strange stories to tell, or tried and tested methods of finding a co-founder?
Yeah, both. So I did want a technical co-founder for my first company. I knew that. I actually already had an engineer. I had someone building the app, but I wanted a technical co-founder. So I started going to the JS meetup here. I am not technical.
Is it the JavaScript
meetup?
JavaScript meetup.
I'm not technical. And I showed up and I was like, I'm not technical. I'm here to learn about JavaScript. And I have this idea. We're currently building it. But I am interested to see if anybody's super passionate about this idea and fancies a new adventure. And I'm just looking to meet people. So like that, I was trying to go where I thought my potential co-founder might frequent, where his or her haunts, and just hang out, and just be available and let people get to know me. Then there are online. There's there's the one that we do in Scotland, Cofounder Curious. That's modeled off of YC's one. YC's co-founder matching tool. If you don't worry as much about distance and location, it's excellent. It's very good. It asks a lot of questions. It gives you a lot to think about. It gives you a lot of good resources. So you can fill that out. And basically it turns into a connect, pass type thing. and every day you get more potential matches. It's not like Tinder or anything like that. It's a simplified. It's very good, very well done, and ours is modeled after that. So it's just located here, and you get an email whenever someone posts a new one because there's so few of them. But yeah, in terms of odd, so I found my first technical co-founder at the JavaScript meetup, and
Success.
Success for the founders, not success for the business, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But and we had a lot of good conversations then, and I think it was very helpful because we didn't know each other beforehand. But YC, I met quite a few people with my latest one through the YC tool, and like one of them ghosted me. Like we had just signed an agreement, like a proper, like, yeah, let's get into bed now, and then nothing.
Heartbreaking.
It was so heartbreaking.
That's really.
I don't understand why ghosting happened. It was so heartbreaking. It was gut wrenching because I was like, what did I do? Like, what was it? And I was worried. Like, are they alive?
Did you say something wrong?
But like, are they alive? I don't know. They weren't here. They didn't live here. And so I was going to call the police. It was all sorts of things. But this kind of stuff can happen. And they are not alive. Sorry, they are very much alive. It's all good. They just decided to ghost, which was sad. We had talked for like a good 8 months about stuff.
Wow,
yeah.
8 months.
Yeah.
Not even a sorry, this isn't for me anymore. Just disappeared.
Exactly.
I think it was for the best for all
I
of that.
had a friend because I was really worried. I had a friend message them just to see about something else. And they responded quickly. And so I'm like, oh, well, I mean, great that you're alive, but crap, you know. But man, am I happy that happened now and not afterwards. So I think, and also reflecting back on it, there were a lot of little things that I was like, oh, this feels like work, this feels like effort, this feels like not the right kind of work, not the right kind of effort. And so even going through, I was dragging my feet incorporating the business because I was like, I don't know why, I'm just dragging my feet. And as soon as I figured out that he wasn't dead, I was like, oh, I can start the business now. I can incorporate it. It's fine. And I had another co-founder too, and he's great. So yeah, all sorts of different stories to bore you with, but there are a few different words.
Putting yourself out there, I think going where you think your potential co-founder could be is really great advice, actually.
Yeah.
So whether it's a meetup, but the directory is a great resource. So Cofounder Curious, which we've taken the name for the title of today's event, is a great resource if you're looking for a co-founder within Scotland that Rob set up, and again, based off of YC's co-founder matching. So if you're not on there already, I would encourage you to add yourself there. I've realised we've been yapping away for a while now. It's definitely time for some questions. So I am going to grab the Mentimeter just to see if there's any online questions, but I did see a hand up going up early from Ravi, I think. Ravi, if you want to go and shoot off your first question, I'll just repeat it back so those on Zoom can hear.
Yeah, sure. My question was in regards to ghosting as well.
Ghosting, yeah.
In regards to ghosting, yeah. So, I mean, if it's a startup and it's really early and you know, you get equity and all that, what is stopping them from just ghosting you in that process? Like you leave, and then, you know, they make it successful, they don't give you anything.
Yeah,
so the question about ghosting and like, well, what if you start the business, you get equity, and then someone leaves, someone ghosts, and then they go and make it successful, and you don't get anything. Okay. So I guess there's like contracts. If you are signed contracts, especially if you're starting off a co-founding relationship, you have vesting schedules. Like I would strongly encourage you to have vesting schedule also for yourself. Over here, you might also have what's called a reverse vesting schedule. It means you start off with the equity, but you if you leave early, you give back a lot of it. Doesn't really matter. But in that case, that person would probably be a bad leaver, and they just aren't entitled to keeping anything if they leave you, right? If it's the other way around, and like you are forgotten, or you're not allowed to go to the company, you have grounds to employment tribunal. You have all sorts of different grounds, right? I think what often happens is the slight inverse of two people are working on an idea. One person's like, I could do this in a much better way. I'm going to just leave, and I'm going to start off a competing business instead. That's usually what ends up happening in terms of the negative, the reasons why someone. Like the person that I was talking to, that might be his thinking. He might be like, I don't need this chump. I'm going to go off and build my own thing, right? And if that's the case, okay, as long as that's clear, that's fine. At the earliest stages of anything, I think we also over-worry about the effect that someone might have on the business, because it's not about your ideas is shit. It's not the idea, it's the execution of the idea. So I've seen this where someone who's incredibly good at execution, they started working with someone who's incredibly, technically quite gifted, but could not, proverbially tie their shoes from a marketing or operations thing. That person left because they thought they were hot shit. And did they do anything? No. The person just found another technical co-founder and built something that's actually making a crap ton of money. So I think, it depends. But if you're talking about that competing, they're like non-competes. There's, depending on where you are, some of them, sometimes they're enforceable and sometimes they're not. But fundamentally, I would just assume, what's the worst that could happen here and what protection do I need? And if the worst is that person's going to run off with my idea, think through that a little bit more and being like, is that really a problem? If this person, who I still I think he's a smart dude. If he wanted to go off and copy what we had been talking about, I have faith that if I were to do it, I think I would still be able to do it better. So what am I worried about? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to hear. So, I was open to hear anything, but I'm glad that I heard what you said because, brings some peace of mind to me.
Yeah. Again, life is short. There are tons of ideas.
For those on Zoom, Ravi just said that he enjoyed that answer, basically.
It was the perfect
It was the perfect answer.
Perfect
Loved
answer.
everything about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to head to the Menti now, so just to make sure that I'm not leaving them out there. So a few of the questions you've actually already covered, which is fantastic. So someone's asked, have you seen a difference between co-founders working remotely completely versus those that work together in person? I don't know.
I think it's very easy to say one way or the other, and the reason why you'd say it one way or the other is because you are wired to prefer that way or the other. I've seen very, very effective co-founder relationships where people have never met each other. I have also seen people who struggle remotely, and they are just complete powerhouses in person. So I don't think it's necessarily me to pass judgment. My preference is finding the right person and figuring out the best way for me to get to know that right person. Sometimes it's remote. Oftentimes there's a combination of remote and then we're getting together every once in a while to just blast through stuff, and it's so exciting and so awesome. And now we have to calm down on the buzz and go back and then do our work, because if we keep talking to each other, we just brainstorm until
Post-it notes everywhere.
Exactly, and we don't get anything done, right? So it very much depends on. It very much depends. I think the generic wisdom is initially there seems to be a very big reaction to remote and working remote now. Oh, you got to be in the same city. You got to be in the same office. That is true for some people. It doesn't have to be true for everybody. But if you have an instinctive reaction to that, saying, "Oh, I don't like that," or "Oh, that's correct," just question it. Just at least question it to say, "Okay, well, does that mean that I'm actively looking for someone who is based here, or who would be willing to move here, or would be willing to work in an office together?" And if you resolve that, actually that's what I'm looking for, great. You are being clear, and you are saying, if you're building something for everyone, you end up serving no one. If you are saying I want everyone, you end up not finding anyone who's super relevant for you. So yeah, I don't know if that's
definitely. So
sense.
kind of self-awareness on what you need,
Yeah.
and kind of a partnership,
Yeah.
and be able to communicate what you need as well.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Someone has asked on the Menti, I think a follow-up from your answer previously is, should you get an NDA with a co-founder? But
regular co-founder agreements will cover NDAs.
Mm-hmm.
Again, ideas are super cheap. If I ever talk with founders and they're like, "So I'd love to tell you about my idea, but can you sign an NDA first?" I'm like, "Nope, not interested," and you won't find anyone else interested either. If you can't articulate what it is that you want to do in a way that makes you comfortable enough that I can't just take it and start telling people what it is at a party, then you have not advanced the idea far enough, right? I'm not telling you to hand over your underlying models or whatever. what is it? Just what, and I think, I think there's a balance there. The idea of signing a quick NDA, though, in terms of if you're getting to the point of having a conversation, but you don't want a full-on agreement, if you're both up for it, go for it. That's fine. Like, it's not the end of the, like, a mutual NDA is like 4 lines, 3 lines, it's okay.
Not that deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, especially at the early stages, it's going to take a lot of effort for someone to execute your idea, especially if it's just like, my idea is this, and it's 1 line. So kind of relaxing a little bit more around.
It's not even the idea yet. It's probably the problem area. It's probably the idea area. You're probably
the solution's not there yet.
Exactly. You don't know
Got
what
it.
you're building
Yes.
yet.
I'm going to do one more from the audience before we move to our visioning exercise. I'm going to come to whoever wants to ask the question with a mic. Alan, you put up your hand earlier, so I'm going to come to you. There you go.
Hiya. Talked a lot about equity. What about IP? If you further down the line, you can definitely see there's some IP there. I've worked with the PLC and they're mad about it. What kind of that's quite difficult in agreement in terms. What's your experience on all that?
I mean, IP assignations to the entity. Everybody just does IP assignations to the entity. So when you get to the point where you're creating an entity, you will then have a co-founder agreement, or a investment agreement, or co-founders registers, whatever it is. That should include if your co-founder agreement before you had an entity didn't mention IP, then that's where you deal with it. Investors won't put up with it if you other folks won't put up with it if there isn't an IP assignation. And you as a founder should not be, if you're wanting to build something into a business, you shouldn't be holding on to IP personally. As I believe, some people will say, well, I have a personal patent, whatever. Fine. Deal with that, though, in an IP license agreement in perpetuity. Be very clear in your language about how that's dealt with and talk to each other. But IP assignations full on as the default is relatively straightforward. And that's what I would do. The hard part is like when you're bringing in contractors and you're bringing in other people. Again, IP assignation is part of any contract you give, or it should be. But I think the problems that you might experience in the PLC don't exist yet for when it's early, just because you have far fewer people to worry about. Yeah.
We're going to wrap up with a visioning exercise, but just to wrap up this chat, and I hate to use the stereotype that a co-founder is like a spouse or dating, but my sense from this conversation is that it really does seem like it is to really make it last. You need to have those hard discussions about what you want in the future, what you're both like, and being super honest and open and with lots of communication. That's what I kind of took away from it. It's a really intense partnership. You go through a lot and learn a lot with whoever you end up entering a co-founder relationship with. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but it's definitely a huge support to have when you're going through that journey. It can be a super lonely journey, so to have someone who's in the insanity with you, especially at the early stages, it's really important. But yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts,
No
Rob.
problem.
And Rob's going to wrap up with some questions for you all to reflect on. Certainly before this networking, we wrap up with the networking. Would you rather stand or would you rather sit?
I'll sit. That's right.
And I will move the slides. Right.
All right. So this is just stuff for you to think about, and you might write it down. Might want to take a picture, and then so there are 2 slides. One is So this one we'll leave up later. Can you go to the next one first?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first off, a lot of people are like, I want to start a business. I want to do something, and then they're like, I don't have time to think about some longer term stuff. Or they're like, I don't deserve to be able to think about longer term stuff. And the thing is that I'm not super keen on folks that push values, vision, and mission, and all that kind of stuff super early on. Although it is important, this is personal. It's not about the company, though. If you're signing up to 5, 10, 15 years of your life, you should at least have an idea of what matters to you and what doesn't matter to you yet. Maybe, so like, what does 5 years into the future look like? Have you already exited? Are you sitting on a beach, with a bunch of Bitcoin? I don't know. Like what is it that you're doing? I love visioning exercises. Like visioning exercises are like trying to put yourself in the future, describing in vivid detail about what this moment looks like. what are we on, 2029, and I've just gotten back from Tokyo because we just signed a deal with Toyota, and we're all buzzing. And the team of 50 is like gathering together in Serbia for our offsite. Whatever, like you craft something that feels real, knowing that you're not saying this is what I'm getting to. This is a multiverse exercise of like, this is one universe that I could feel really happy in. So what I'm deciding, what kind of things I'm wanting to sign up to, and what kind of people I want to meet, and how I want to serve them, and I want them to serve me, it means that still could happen, right? You're not going to end up in that. You might end up in something very different, but at least it might be an equivalent, right? So these are the kinds of things that I would be thinking about. And if the answer is I don't know to any of these, that's fine. But then noodle it. Like start just think about that, because it'll make you a lot clearer in terms of what it is that you want. Don't be afraid to actually be clear about what it is that you want, and don't be afraid to say, I really don't care. Like, you have the right not to have an opinion on something. Are we remote or in person? I don't care, as long as we make a crap ton of money, or as long as we work really well together. Should I move for the right team? Maybe. I don't know. At this moment, I'm not tied down with anything. So whatever it is. So what's an example of a day in your life? Describing the team. This again, when I say culture, it's like it's not necessarily like visions, values, and all that necessarily. It's just what are projects like? What are days like? How are you interacting with each other? How are you coming together or going apart? What has your co-founder done throughout the 5 years to help you get to that success? A lot of people can't answer that because they're like, oh, I don't know, they built the app and then they buggered off. It's like, okay, well maybe then you don't want, you don't need a technical co-founder, right? Maybe it's someone, maybe you can actually say, they stayed for the first 2 years and then we outgrew them. And they knew that we outgrew them and they've moved on to something else because you've had that conversation with a co-founder. Or you're looking for someone who wants to just come in, get something started, and then buzz off, right? When you disagreed on core aspects of the business, how did you address them? Not if, but when. Hey, we got into a big fight about X, and this is how we dealt with it. Just some starting questions is super helpful. And then let me go back. So this will keep up. But these are the kinds of things that I would maybe encourage you guys to ask each other, whether it's in the chat or breakout rooms or in person. These are the kinds of areas like icebreakers for a potential co-founder, right? You want to try and get to know somebody, even if you have an idea and you're here to talk about your idea. Try and put yourself in active listening mode and try and understand the other person in terms of where they're coming from. Because you coming with a wall and them coming with a wall you won't get to know each other. So both come from a curious perspective, even if you don't necessarily think. If you both want to work on something else, you might discover something about yourself and about them that improves the process. So control motivated or community motivated, like I was saying, just you can ask questions around that. What are you looking for in a co-founder in terms of like, is it specific skill set? Is it decision making ability? Is it values? Is it ways of working? What kind of business in terms of size and scope do you want to build? The answer still might be I don't know, and that's okay, but at least have the person say, oh, I'm not sure. This could be a bootstrap thing. It could be bootstrapped for a while, and if it takes off, we're going to raise a shit ton of money. Like, it might be a whole bunch of different things. At least have that, noodle that over in public while you're talking to someone. And then what problems or problem areas excite you the most? This also is kind of classic. You might meet someone, for example, with a background in something that you think will not be interested in what it is that you're working on. And interestingly, you might find that is completely not the case, and they're actually fascinated by, they don't have a background in health, but they've always wanted to do something in health. So ask them what their interests are, if they have any, what excites them the most, and that might be a good jumping off point for further discussion. So, does that, I think that covers it all. Does that all make sense? Any questions about that?
Some nodding, head shaking, Good
Okay,
good
cool.
things in people in the room. Online people, I can't see you, but nod and Erin will feed back to me if you were nodding. We have 1 minute left until we open up into networking. I'm going to leave these on the screen. So we wanted to leave networking at the end because after we've had this discussion and presented these questions, we want you to kind of enter this networking section with a bit more intention, perhaps using some of these questions if you haven't used something like that already. Of course, Rob and I will be here in person for anyone who wants to chat about first steps or the topic of co-founders. And I just wanted to touch on some of the resources we've mentioned. So Rob started Cofounder Curious, which is a listing to find co-founders in Scotland. There's the Y Combinator co-founding matching platform. And I wanted to give a shout out to our self-paced online course called Startup Basics. There is a module on how to work with different people at the early stages, and there's a section on working with early contributors and founder and collaborator agreements, which might be of use to some of you. So again, that's free to access to anyone here in the room. And any other sort of links or books mentioned, we will follow up and share those as well. So if anyone was frantically trying to scribble things down or trying to take a mental note, fear not, you will be sent a long list of resources mentioned today later. And just to quickly, again, shout out, so if anyone is taking part in First Steps or is interested in First Steps, Rob is going to be our speaker for week 2. So if you loved Rob, well, great, you're going to see him again. If you didn't, don't worry, there are other speakers. So win, 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 win. But yes, I'm in the room to chat about First Steps to anyone who's keen. And yeah, I'd like to allow you all to, for those of you in the room, eat the rest of the food, to drink the rest of the drink, and have hopefully productive chats. And for those of you joining online, Erin will help facilitate some chit chats, open some breakout rooms for you as well. You're more than welcome to hang on to the call if you'd like to continue the chats. And for those of you online who might have questions about First Steps, get in touch with me on the online community platform, and I can absolutely help answer any questions about First Steps there. But thank you for joining us today. Enjoy nibbles, networking, and yeah, thanks for coming. Lovely. Was there, that's the last.